Hi, my name is Sanaa, and welcome back to the Hip and Cool podcast. I am just going to jump right into it today. I am known by my friends as somewhat of a Megamind connoisseur. Do not let that make you click away from this podcast, okay? This is who I am. The reason why I bring that up is because the second movie in the series is coming out, and a lot of people were sending it to me because they know how I feel about Megamind. They know I don't play about Megamind, and I was so unhappy. I wasn't just unhappy because it looked absolutely terrible. I was also unhappy mostly because I feel like there's this weird resurgence, or rather push, from corporate America to just force feed us the past with a rusty spork. I don't understand what it is about reboots and reunions that just makes corporate TV just so excited. They're like, what if we just brought back the past and made it this thing? I'm not a big fan of reboots or rehashings of the past. I am a very big nostalgic person though, but there's just something about a reboot that just doesn't eat for me. I feel like for me, if I get an itch to watch something that came out in the past, how to scratch that itch is just to rewatch it. I'm not like wishing that it came back from the dead. You know what I mean? I feel like we're beating a dead horse. I have watched Megamind upwards of probably like 20 times. I don't ever want a sequel. I never, ever watched that and was like, oh yeah, I need an entire movie dedicated to what he's up to after this. No, I was never fiending for that. So part of me just got really mad that they made it A, and then B, to see it be made so haphazardly just pissed me off even more. So I was just like, okay, I'm not even going to acknowledge that this movie even exists, because there's just no way that you're going to do Megamind this dirty. So all of this got me thinking, and I was like, bro, what is it about nostalgia that really, because it's not just corporate America, right? It's not just like, oh, corporate America kind of got this from nowhere, and they just assumed that people enjoy the past and enjoy being nostalgic, because that does come from somewhere. A lot of my friends and I love watching High School Musical over and over and over. I have so many people in my life that love watching things from their youth. I mean, who doesn't like watching things from their youth, or just rewatching things in general? So I wanted to talk about me first, just to give you kind of a scope, right? So for me, I'm obsessed with the 2000s, that whole decade, and the early 2010s, and the 80s. The 80s is just something that I cling to so much. I love 80s music. I love 80s fashion. I love 80s film and television. I am a very big fan of the 80s. So much so that I even find myself dressing that way most of the time. And I usually kind of not ignore, but I'm not really the type of person to go out and buy trendy clothes. I'm the type of person who, if they want to try a trend, I'll usually try it with the clothes that I already have, as opposed to going out and buying it. But most of the time, I'm going to the thrift store, buying secondhand clothing, and just, working with that, which is a great way also to shop as well. Secondhand is always a good way to shop. Before I go to shop somewhere, I'm never okay, let me see what the trends are. I usually go with oh, what is my heart telling me? What do I feel like adapting from the 80s today? A lot of my youth I spent as well just rewatching old TV shows, and just reliving the past. Up until high school, I want to say, up until the end of high school, I feel like all I used to do was just rewatch old movies, rewatch old TV shows, and just listen to older music that I did when I was in middle school. I just feel like I was just constantly just going back and just listening to things over and over again, and watching things over and over again, and just being in such a loop, a constant loop of just early 2000s, 2010s. And I feel like because of that, I don't feel very in the loop sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, oh, what's going on with this? What's going on? That's I'm the one who has to go out and ask nowadays what's going on in the world, because I am not so much in the loop TV wise. Like every time a new TV show comes out, I'm usually skeptical to watch. Sometimes there are moments where I look on the internet and see like what people are thinking about it first before I go and watch. But most of the time, I'm gonna opt to more watch something that I watched prior, or a season 2 of something that I'm like, oh, like season 2 of the show that I love is coming out. Like, let me go watch that. And I find that I want to watch more modern TV shows and watch more modern things that are coming out, or even not even more modern, just things that aren't familiar to me, unfamiliar media. I want to, but there's just this kind of comfort for me that comes along with watching something that I know is already gonna be a banger, right? So it made me research. I was like, what's going on in my mind right now? Like, I need to figure out what's going on. And on top of that, I'm curious to see why reboots and why nostalgia is such a commodity right now. Like, it's such a big thing. Like, just bringing back things from the past is a very big market right now, right? So Vox did an article with Crystal Russell, who is a professor of marketing at the Grazia Dio Business School at Pepperdine University. And she did a study where she interviewed 23 participants and parsed out their motivations for viewing familiar media, right? And just like media that they love. So after interviewing all 23 participants, she found that the reason why people rewatch a lot of old stuff / familiar stuff is not because of nostalgia, but it's because it kind of helps people gauge how much they've grown since first encountering that piece of media, which I found very interesting, actually. She says, the deep connection that you make to the show provides this self-reflexive moment that you're like, wow, when I first watched this, I was 20, and now I'm 40 and I have kids. You see it differently, and that allows you to be like, I'm a different person than I was then. And that's so interesting to me because I somewhat see the appeal of a show maybe getting a reboot, like Fuller House, right? Or iCarly, because those types of shows are family oriented shows where it's like Full House, you had everybody kind of growing together for X amount of years, 10 plus years, I want to say. That show ran for so long, and I guess there was this like itch to know like what is Stephanie up to, like what is Uncle Jesse up to, and what are his kids up to. Like there was this kind of like, I guess, precedent set for so many years that was like we were privy to these people's lives for so many years that suddenly not knowing what they're doing is harming your mental health, I guess. Or even like iCarly, when she left and went to, was it Italy she went to at the end of the original show? I think she went to Italy with her grandpa or something like that, or Germany. She went to some country where grandpa to live and whatever. So I can see, at least from my perspective, because that's the show I grew up with, as a viewer, wanting to know what's going on with Carly. Like, how is that going on? Like, does she have a boo? Like, is she loving it? Is she still friends with Sam? Blah, blah, blah. And from a viewer's perspective, I can get that. But part of me is like, leave it where it is. Like, Megamind probably has the most cliffhanger ending ever. Not ever, Lord. But it's kind of a cliffhanger. You kind of just have to assume everything's okay. Like, part of me is in that mode where I'm like, if you love something, let it go. Like, you can't be fiending to know what's going on with the characters from an old TV show or old movie. Like, they are living their lives. Like, you have to just trust that everything's going to be okay. And even when things aren't, like you saw in the movie or TV show, they persevere. They are the type of people who persevere through hardship. Like, you know what I mean? Unless the TV show or movie had like a bad ending, I can see like why you might be worried about them then. But other than that, like, you gotta let things go sometimes. Like, you can't be fiending to be like, oh, what's going on with this character? Like, there are times where I be really fiending to know what's going on after the Truman Show. Like, that was a wonderful movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a movie from the 80s, or no, I think it's from the 90s, starring Jim Carrey. So, The Truman Show is a movie from 1998, and it stars Jim Carrey, and it's a wonderful movie. I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't watched it, but the ending, ooh, that ending is crazy, and you're just like, wait, what's going to happen? Like, what happens at the end of this movie? But at the end of the day, I made my peace with that because I'm like, I want this character to have their life. You know what I mean? I want them to live. I want them to experience a life they never got to live. You know what I mean? I think that you gotta let them go. Let them go. And you just, I don't know, you gotta just trust everything's good. Like, if you always fiending to know what's going on, that means you not trusting that they're doing good. That means you worried about them. Why are you worried about them for? Let them go. Let them go. So after reading that Vox article, I wanted to research more. So I looked up this article from Everyday Health, and it says 3 science-based reasons that we rewatch old media, right? Number 1, it may help us feel less lonely. So if you're feeling super alone and you're watching a show like Friends, or you're watching a show like Fuller House, or you're watching a show like iCarly, it can make you feel like you have some type of affinity with people, right? When I was in middle school, that was probably it was the most lonely time of my life. When I found Fairy Tale, you could not tell me anything about Fairy Tale. Whenever Natsu, the main character, for those who are not familiar, whenever Natsu used to get and be like, yo, that's my family, you do not mess with my guild, I used to feel like he was talking about me. I was like, that is my family. Like, don't play with me. Natsu used to go hard for the people in his guild. And everybody in Fairy Tale felt the same way about each other. And feeling that, family, friendship, and, just feelings of closeness, feeling all of that, through thick and thin. Because they used to fight to the death. Through all of that, they're going to save each other. They're going to fight for each other every single time, no matter who the enemy is, no matter what they're bargaining, they're like, no, we don't want anything. We just want to make sure our friends are good. We're safe. We're happy. There was just a type of love there that was just so palatable. And even as a kid, I was able to grasp that. So that's why I can't even fault people who love One Piece, because I know how it feels to be watching a show and you're like, no, this is family. This is family. You're going to conventions, meeting up with people who talk about the show, right? Then you're watching the show on your own and then seeing all of the things go down where they're just fighting together, they're eating together, they're laughing together, they're literally just a family. That on screen and off kind of interaction that you have amongst the fans and amongst the characters in the show is unmatched. And I think that that's why I loved anime and felt so close to anime as a kid, was because I was lonely. And being in communities online and having kind of a affinity with people who were just make-believe characters made me feel like I belong somewhere. You know what I mean? I felt oh my god, I might go to school and maybe be lonely or whatever, but when I'm watching Fairy Tale, I know that I feel this semblance of closeness because X, Y, and Z reason. It's real. When you're in a lonely state, watching other people engage in co-regulation in a good way makes you feel warm and fuzzy too. You're oh, this exists, right? It might not exist in my everyday, but it exists on the screen right now, and it's giving me hope that maybe one day I can experience that, or maybe just watching it happen in real time is nice because you can't fathom it. I feel that's another thing too, but that's why they say representation matters, right? If you've never seen a black doctor in your entire life, you've never seen one, and you see a doctor who is black, you're gonna be oh, well, I never even saw a black person wear a stethoscope. I never considered this a possibility. But having proof of it allows you to believe that it can exist, right? Seeing is believing. So when you are a kid and you don't have friends, right? And you're oh, well, da da da, but you see a television show depicting friendship, depicting receiving and giving, secure love to one another, it makes you believe that it exists. You know what I mean? So good representations of friendship, relationships, ethnic groups, sexual identities, all of these things are important to see because it helps people who are finding that difficult to replicate in their everyday see something as possible for them, you know? Shira Gabriel, PhD, a professor of psychology at SUNY Buffalo, my alma mater, says we need to feel connected to people in order to be happy and healthy. We evolved that way, but we did not evolve to differentiate between real groups in our lives and the ones we see on TV. Even though we know they are not real, they feel real to us. Yeah, like literally, I thought I was in fairy tale. Let me relax. I knew I wasn't in fairy tale, but it felt like I was. Number 2 reason, according to Everyday Health, is it's emotionally comfortable. Kind of similar to the first one. It says, if you're stressed or tired or overworked, watching a non-favorite show can add to the problem rather than help. But when you instead already know the story and what's going to happen, you're less likely to be disappointed, scared, or sad from it. Which makes sense, right? You can feel safer and like more secure. You don't have to worry like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And last but not least, it may help you recharge your batteries. It says in psychology, the definition of self-control is the ability to be in command of one's behavior, overt, covert, emotional, or physical, and to restrain or inhibit one's impulses. So reading that last point from Everyday Health made me want to research this topic in regards to anxiety. Apparently, tune in, tap in, y'all, tap in. Especially my anxiety feeling people who have anxiety, tap in right now, tap in. I'm about to school you because I was schooled yesterday when I read this. If you have anxiety, you're quite prone to enjoying older media because of the mere exposure effect. Now, this brought me back because the mere exposure effect is something I learned about in one of my communication classes in college. The definition is the psychological phenomenon by which people tend to develop liking or disliking for things merely because they are familiar to them. And that makes sense because if you're more familiar with something, sometimes you're more inclined to eat that again. If you go to a new restaurant and you try the chicken pad thai and you go back, you're most likely going to get the chicken pad thai again, depending on who you are. For me, recently, what I've been trying to do is try something new, especially because if it's a restaurant I like, I'm like, well, that means that it's got to have other better things on the menu. You can't just have one good thing. So I'll at least try my best to try something new, but especially in the past, like even now, I get the same thing from Chipotle every single time. Like, I don't try anything new with Chipotle. Chipotle has my tried and true order, and I don't venture off those menu items. Like, those are my menu items. I'm probably going to eat that meal for the rest of my life. Like, I love Chipotle, and I love my order. Like, I feel like there's also not that many options at Chipotle anyway, so regardless, it's like... So, the website that I found called The Guest House, which is so interesting. If you're looking for place in Florida to, get help with your mental health, the guest house, man, the guest house. So they say the mind of someone with anxiety can bring them anguish and distress on the daily. They could also feel these negative emotions when trying to engage in a show they've never seen before. Instead, they could watch the same show repeatedly just to feel something positive, right? If you're always like kerfuffled with shit in your mind, the last thing you want to do is add to that, right? You don't want to add anxiety to that. I think I spoke about that earlier. So what's easier to do? Watch something you know is going to be good. And part of me was thinking about that because I feel like I don't watch new stuff, not because I'm like scared of what's going to happen or because I'm anxious on the daily. I mean, I do have anxiety, but I think it's mostly for me because I don't want to be disappointed. I just have a fear of disappointment a lot of times because I put things on pedestals and in my head I'm like, I don't have time to like invest time and energy into this thing that's just going to ultimately be a disappointment. I would much rather watch something that I know is going to be good instead of like investing more time and more energy into something that could possibly make me sad or upset me, and then I'll feel like it was a waste of time when I could have been doing something else, I guess. I don't know. But then there's a contrast, though, because with music, I am very inclined to listen to new music. Because if you think about it, one song is what average 3 minutes versus a movie or a TV show. TV show is like a couple of episodes long, X amount of seasons, whatever. Movies are like 1 hour plus. my music taste is so much more developed and expansive than like the taste I have in like movies and TV shows, because I think it takes more time and energy to like sit and enjoy a movie, sit and enjoy a TV show than it does to like sit and enjoy a song. Also here, I'm not talking about anime because I've literally watched 150 plus anime, but like I said, I was because I found it in a point where I was very lonely. So, I was running them things. I was like, show me another one. Show me another one. Like, I was going crazy watching anime. Yes, I was. Like, don't even play with me. The next reason that the guest house says is lowered cognitive load. Because we know what we're getting ourselves into, our perceptual fluency is heightened. Perceptual fluency is the personal feeling of ease or difficulty while processing mental information, right? And last but not least, we're back. We're back, people, to the feelings of control. For a person with anxiety disorder, their diagnosis is out of their control. Then they go about their daily life, which they feel is mostly out of their control. Next, they're flooded with thoughts that are largely out of their control. Rewatching old things means you can choose the genre, the emotions, and the characters you'll mentally interact with. It's not a lot, but sometimes it's just enough control to prevent an anxiety attack. And all of this can help to reclaim some semblance of control in their lives. Part of me really, 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 really was struck by that when I read that yesterday. I was like, oh, like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then I didn't feel necessarily connected to it, but we'll get into that in the takeaways, which is the next topic. So the main takeaways from that last article were that I had a period in my life where I had just been obsessed with control. I found that for a very long time, I felt like my life was kind of crumbling under my fingers for many reasons. I didn't want to be in the present moment, and there was no use for me to be present. I was like, so what's the point of being present if the present moment is ass? So what I'm going to do is watch movies, watch TV shows, listen to music, and just re-listen to it over and over and over and over again. If I find the perfect TV shows, what's the use in watching any new ones? And in a way, right, that was me gaining control over my life. I played Sims for upwards of like 12 years of my life, from like Sims 2 all the way to Sims 4 now. I don't play as much anymore, but I realized in my formative years, I was playing Sims like crazy. But that's also when I was experiencing a lot of a lack of self-control. I didn't feel like I had any say in what was going on in my life. I didn't feel like I had any agency. And you kind of don't as a kid. Even in All About Love by Bell Hooks, she talks about how kids are the most marginalized group of people in the world. Like, kids really don't have much agency or control over their lives. And even though you can say, yes, you do, blah, 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 you have this, you have that, it's just like a lot of times you really don't. And you're treated like second-class citizen when you're a kid. I'm not even just talking about, from parents or whatever. In general, kids are just like mistreated. In schools, at home, or just in society, they're seen as just like, you don't know any better, you don't know anything, so just like stay in your place. And it sucks because it's just like, oh, well, like I have to stay in this bubble that you didn't make yourself, that society made for you. So I guess in a way, I became obsessed with control because I didn't feel like I had any. Then high school came and I just knew something was wrong. I knew something was up. I was like, I know something's going on. I don't know what it is. You don't even have to tell me, Sana. This is me talking to myself. But we gonna go away to school. Get thrown in the deep end and see if that helps at all. And it did. I feel like every episode I'm just like, go away to school if you can. But I really think it helped develop a part of my brain that would have been stagnant for another 4 years. It isn't really that I am solved and I'm cured of all mental illness, blah, blah, blah. But I do think that gaining control over my life was through relinquishing control, right? When I got older, I realized that control doesn't really come from you being able to have your way, right? Your way being like people will react to you the way that you desire them to. Adjusting the way I talk to people so that I get a certain reaction. You know what I mean? All that is just so low vibrational, bro. Like, I'm sitting here like trying my best to like be a person that is perceived as okay so that I can take a breath. So that I get permission from my outer world to like be okay and like take a second to be like, I'm good. No, like it's such a means to an end to try and like find all this control because especially when you're trying to control other people, that's when I realized that like this is not working. Because when you sit and you're trying to control other people or other people's perception of you, rather, it's like you're never giving yourself a chance to really breathe. So what control really is you letting go of the reins, you saying like, no, I no longer need to be in control of this situation. Control really isn't the girl we paint her out to be. Allowing people to act the way they do while I'm being my authentic self shows me much more about that person than acting in a way that's catering to their every whim. Like, it's so much more beneficial to both parties if I act like myself, because it gives them a chance to be themselves and then me to actually sit back and be present with that and be like, oh, like this is who you truly are. And becoming a stranger to myself was just never what it was. No. Losing that relationship with myself and becoming a stranger to myself will forever, ever, ever be the thing that I will never allow myself to do again. That was the worst time of my life, I think, to date. And that's when I realized this is the worst time of my life. You know that video of Wendy Williams when she's like, well, it could be worse. No, actually, this is the worst. Like, no. Like, that was me. That was dead me. And I was like, yo, dead becoming a stranger to myself. We're not doing this right now. And so this is what really sparked my whole, like, so now get your shit together kind of mentality. God came to me in a dream. Jesus Christ Almighty. No, I am just saying that, like, whatever it was that happened that really woke me up, it was just my realization that, like, whatever I was doing for X amount of years just wasn't working. It happened right before I left college when I realized I wanted to go away, and now it's happening right as soon as I leave college, right? Because I had so much control for 4 years. I talked about this in my post-grad video. I had so much control over my life for 4 years, or had relinquished control in order to get control for 4 years. And then after being jobless, losing money, and X, Y, and Z, after college, I was like, oh, like all that, like mental health that I worked so hard to keep up in college is all of a sudden gone. And I feel so lost right now. And I feel like I'm becoming a stranger to myself again. And I did become a stranger to myself, and it really, really, really sucked. It was terrible, and it was taking a toll on not just me but like the people around me I could see, and it was really upsetting. Now that I look back on that time, I'm like, damn, like I could have just chilled out a little bit and I think I would have been all right. And I realized that when I'm out of control, when I feel out of control, that's when I stick to my more nostalgic behaviors. I really want to watch old TV shows again. I really want to like play Sims again. I realize I really want to listen to old music, and just to get some type of like connection to something again, I start acting spontaneous. I'm like, I don't really know who I am right now. I'm losing this connection with myself and I don't have any control. Like, maybe if I, go to this random, event or whatever, maybe I'll feel so much better. When in reality, I was just kind of setting myself up for failure. The main takeaways are, I want to watch Megamind less and less. Do not be alarmed. That is a good thing. That is a good thing. I don't feel the need to rewatch old movies anymore. I'm pretty good with letting go of old clothing. And I've been in a rut fashion-wise and media-wise because of that, because I've kind of created an entire personality out of reliving the past through my media consumption and fashion. Now I realize that as I gain more control over my life and things feel less out of my hands, I find that the old stuff doesn't scratch that itch anymore. But instead, I want to engage more. I feel like because looking at the past is really just kind of disengaging from the present. So in a way, like, by me being okay with the past now and like being fine with what, you know, media and stuff that I loved as a kid, and like just being like, oh, you know what, that is put to rest, I can engage with the 80s with so much better of a lens now. Now I want to find substance behind my interest for the 80s. Like, I am compiling a list of like movies, TV shows, and music from the 80s that I will eventually watch. I find that that will probably give me a better gauge as to why I like that decade so much. And I don't want to like it just because I'm romanticizing it. Like, what fashion movements were going on back then? What was the music scene like? What movies were popular? Like, I want to engage with the 80s with so much of a better scope now. I feel like that's what I'm more interested in doing now, as opposed to being like, oh, the 80s was so much better, blah, blah. And then when it comes to just movies in general, I am setting more goals for myself. Like, I made a goal this month to watch 4 movies. So far, I've only watched 1. I watched Poor Things. That movie was wonderful. I liked it so much. Tell me what you thought of Poor Things if you watched it. But I think I can watch more movies than 4. I think I can do that. The way that I'm engaging with media now is just showing me how much I've grown. I no longer make a cult of just rewatching old Disney. It was getting to be kind of sad. It was like, oh girl, what are you watching besides like old Disney, old Nick, old, you know, Nicktoons, blah blah blah. Like, what are you actually watching? Like, I used to fiend all the time, and like, I go on Tubi. Tubi's my favorite app. Tubi has everything I like on there. Like, everything I like is on Tubi. It's so good. It's literally phenomenal. That app is wonderful. They have Archie's Weird Mysteries. They have They have Jacob Tutu on there. They have Flight 29 Down. That's before Corbin Bleu was on High School Musical. That's how you know I was really in there. Like, that app has everything. They have 16, which is like an old Cartoon Network cartoon, like, Lord. And they also have every single season of Degrassi on there. Like, it just can't get any better than Tubi. It can't get any better than Tubi. Like, you're just not going to be able to convince me. So, yeah. But at the same time, I still want to engage in, like, modern media. To some extent, at least. Lord. So, I am making it my business to try and do that. And stop trying to let nostalgia rule my life. Because ain't nothing so special about nostalgia, right? And I'm getting so sick of these reboots. I really am. Like, Megamind coming out really just put that fire under me. I was pissed when I saw that trailer. I was like, y'all better not. Anyways, before I start ranting about, like, the Hunger Games or something, Lord, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Hip and Cool podcast. I am so grateful if you made it to the end, and I so appreciate all your support thus far. Thank you so much for all the love on the previous episode. That episode was so dear to my heart, and I'm so glad it was being well received. I am so grateful for all the love in general that this podcast has been getting. I'm so happy, and I am grateful if you're making the Hip and Cool podcast a part of your day. My main hope for you is that you're choosing love always. I hope you're choosing love always, you know? And if you're not, you can start today. We gonna start right now, okay? Choose love always. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.